Before I tell you why we never stop at certain overlooks on going to the Sun Road after 6 p.m., I need you to understand something about mountain highways. Most people think the danger is the narrow roads, the sheer drops, the hairpin turns. They're wrong. The real danger is what happens when the sun dips below the peaks and the shadows stretch across the alpine meadows like reaching fingers. Are you watching this late at night? Maybe you're planning a Glacier National Park trip and researching going to the Sun Road. Drop a comment and let me know. Because if you've ever driven that 50-mile stretch of engineering marvel, if you've ever pulled over at Logan Pass or the Loop to take photos as evening approaches, you need to hear this story. What I'm about to tell you might change your travel plans. My name is Travis Holden, and I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for 4 years. I work primarily on going to the Sun Road operations, which means I'm responsible for one of the most spectacular and dangerous roads in the national park system. In 4 years, I've responded to 23 vehicle accidents, evacuated hundreds ahead of sudden storms, and coordinated 9 rescue operations for stranded hikers. And 7 months ago, I lost 3 fellow rangers to something that the official report calls a disappearance due to early season avalanche conditions. But I know that's not what happened, because I found their vehicles at Logan Pass, engines running, doors open, personal items scattered like they'd left in a hurry. And what the lead ranger had written in his patrol log in those final minutes doesn't match any avalanche I've ever studied. Let me start at the beginning, 7 months ago, on what should have been a routine evening patrol. It was late September, just before going to the Sun Road closes for winter. We'd had an early cold snap, and road crews were already preparing for seasonal closure. The road would shut down in mid-October, not reopening until late June after months of snow removal. Graham Foster had been my training officer when I first started at Glacier. He was 44, had worked here for 16 years, knew going to the Sun Road better than anyone. He'd driven it in every season, every weather condition, survived multiple close calls with rock slides and sudden whiteouts. On September 23rd, he organized a final sweep patrol before closure. 3 rangers total: himself, a younger ranger named Kendrick, and a seasonal employee named Amy who was finishing her last week before heading back to college. Standard protocol was to drive the entire 50 miles, checking that all pullouts and overlooks were clear of stragglers, making sure no one got caught on the road after dark. They left the West Glacier entrance at 4 p.m., planning to reach the east side by 7 p.m. Plenty of daylight. No weather concerns. Routine. At 6:15 p.m., Graham radioed in from Logan Pass. "This is Foster. We're at the Continental Divide, checking the visitor center area. All clear so far." "Copy that. Weather looks good. Safe drive." "Roger. One thing, though. There's someone at the overlook, standing at the wall, looking out at the peaks. But they're not moving. Been watching them for 5 minutes. No camera, no phone, just standing there. Could be a hiker taking a break. You want to check on them?" There was a pause. Then Graham's voice came back, different, strained. "That's the thing. I can't tell if they're actually a person, the way they're standing. It's too still, too perfect, like a statue. And the light's wrong around them. Everything else is in sunset gold, but they're in shadow even though there's no shadow source." "Graham, you okay? You sound off." "I'm fine, just tired. Long season. We're going to check it out, make sure it's not someone in distress. Stand by." That was the last normal transmission we received from them. What came next was 15 minutes of broken, panicked radio calls that didn't make sense. At 6:21 p.m., the figure moved. It turned to look at us, but it didn't turn like a person. It rotated, like it was on a pivot. And its face, there's no face, just smooth, like looking at someone through frosted glass. At 6:23 p.m., there are more of them now. 3 at the Bird Woman overlook, 2 at the Loop. They're all facing the road, all perfectly still. Kendrick is saying we should leave, but Amy wants to investigate. She thinks they might need help. At 6:26 p.m., Amy's getting out of the vehicle. I told her to stay in, but she's not listening. She's walking toward the figure. It's not moving, just standing there, waiting. At 6:28 p.m. Oh, God. Oh, God. Amy touched it, reached out to tap its shoulder, and her hand went through, like it was made of smoke, but then it solidified, grabbed her arm. She's screaming. She's trying to pull away, but it's pulling her toward the edge, toward the drop. Kendrick is running to help her, but... Static. Then silence. Then one final transmission at 6:32 p.m., barely a whisper. They're taking us. All of us. Off the overlooks, into the spaces between. Tell the others. Tell them never stop after 6. The road belongs to something else when the sun drops below the peaks. Search and rescue deployed immediately. They found all 3 ranger vehicles at Logan Pass, parked at different overlooks. Engines still running, doors open, Graham's radio on the dashboard, still set to the correct frequency. Amy's jacket on the passenger seat. Kendrick's ranger hat on the ground near the overlook wall. But no people. No signs of struggle beyond some scuff marks near the wall edges. No blood. No evidence of foul play or accident. Just 3 empty vehicles and scattered belongings. They searched for 2 weeks. Helicopters, ground teams, dogs. Covered every trail, every ravine, every possible fall zone within 10 miles of Logan Pass. Found nothing. The official investigation concluded that an unusual avalanche had swept all 3 rangers off the overlooks, that their bodies were buried under snow somewhere in the vast backcountry. That recovery would have to wait until spring melt. But I'd heard the radio transmissions. I'd listened to Graham describe figures that weren't human, that rotated instead of turned, that could shift between solid and incorporeal. And I'd read his patrol log, the final entry written at 6:19 p.m. The overlooks change at sunset. Something takes over the viewing platforms. Stay in vehicles after 6. Tell Travis. That message was meant for me, and I intended to figure out what it meant. Over the next few months, I investigated quietly, went through historical records, looking for patterns, and I found them. Since Going to the Sun Road opened in 1933, there had been 26 unexplained disappearances, all between late September and early October during the final weeks before winter closure, all between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m., all from specific overlooks: Logan Pass, The Loop, Bird Woman Falls, Weeping Wall. And every single disappearance report mentioned the same detail. Figures seen standing at overlooks, perfectly still, not responding to calls, appearing and disappearing, and always facing the road. I found references in older documents, too. Construction workers in the 1920s who'd refused to work certain sections of the road after dark. Native American guides warning the early surveyors about places where the spirits gathered at sunset. Blackfeet legends about the high passes being doorways to other realms when the day and night were balanced. One name kept appearing in recent reports: Ray Kowalski, road maintenance supervisor, 18 years with the park. If anyone knew the unofficial history of Going to the Sun Road, it would be him. I found him at the West Glacier maintenance yard in late October, after the road had officially closed for the season. He was winterizing equipment, draining fuel lines, preparing for 6 months of snow. "Ray, I'm Travis Holden. I was Graham Foster's trainee." He looked at me for a long moment, tools still in hand. "I heard you've been asking questions about the overlooks, about what happens after 6 p.m. Graham's last message was for me. He wanted me to know something about the road, about sunset." Ray set down his tools and gestured for me to follow him to his office. Inside, he pulled out a map of Going to the Sun Road. But it wasn't a normal Park Service map. This one had markings, red circles around certain overlooks, notations in the margins, times, dates, names. This map has been maintained by road crew since the 1930s. Every supervisor passes it to the next. It shows the danger zones, the places where people vanish. He pointed to the red circles. Logan Pass, The Loop, Bird Woman Falls, Weeping Wall. 4 overlooks where something happens when the sun drops below the peaks. What happens? We call them the threshold figures. They appear at sunset, stand at the overlooks, wait for people to approach, and if you interact with them, if you touch them or speak to them or even acknowledge them too directly, they take you, pull you off the overlook, into whatever space exists between the mountain and the sky. That sounds insane. It is insane. But it's also real. I've seen them myself. Twice. Both times I was smart enough to stay in my vehicle and keep driving. He tapped the map. The first documented encounter was in 1935. A park superintendent and his wife disappeared from Logan Pass at sunset. Their car was found running, doors open, but they were gone. Since then, it happens every few years. Always late September or early October. Always between 6 and 7:30 p.m. Why those times? Why those specific overlooks? Best theory we have comes from the Blackfeet elders. They say the high mountain passes are thin places, boundaries between worlds. During most of the day, our reality is strong enough that the boundary stays closed. But at sunset, when the light is changing, when day is dying and night is being born, the boundary weakens, and things from the other side can cross over. The threshold figures are guardians, or maybe hunters. They claim anyone who ventures onto the overlooks during the transition time. Graham said Amy touched one of them. Said her hand went through at first, but then it solidified and grabbed her. Ray nodded grimly. That's how they work. They appear insubstantial, like shadows or smoke. People think they're seeing things, imagining it, so they reach out to check if it's real. And the moment you make physical contact, they become solid. And they're strong enough to pull a full-grown adult over a wall, strong enough to drag 3 experienced rangers off overlooks simultaneously. So, what do? Close the road? Put up warnings? The road already closes for winter right when the danger period hits. As for warnings, he showed me a stack of official proposals from over the decades. Every 10 years or so, someone tries to add specific warnings about the overlooks at sunset. Every time, the proposals get rejected. Too vague, no specific threat identified. Would cause unnecessary alarm, the usual bureaucratic resistance to acknowledging something that doesn't fit neat categories. So we just let people die? Let rangers disappear? We do what we can within the system. We try to clear the road before 6 p.m. during late September. We discourage sunset viewing at those specific overlooks. We train rangers to recognize the danger signs. He pulled out a worn notebook. And we maintain this. Unofficial protocols, survival information, past ranger to ranger, crew to crew. Knowledge that might save lives even if we can't officially acknowledge why. He handed me the notebook. Inside were decades of observations and strategies. How to recognize the threshold figures before you get too close. Warning signs that they're active. Methods for resisting if they try to pull you. And most importantly, the core survival protocol. Never stop at the marked overlooks after 6 p.m. between September 15th and October 15th. If you must drive the road during sunset hours, keep moving. Don't pull over. Don't investigate anything you see standing at the overlooks. Just drive. Graham knew these rules, I said. Why did he stop? Because Amy didn't know. She was seasonal, only here for 3 months. Graham probably thought he could check on the figure quickly, confirm it was dangerous, and leave. He underestimated how fast they can act, how persuasive they can be. Once you're in visual range and the sun's at the right angle, they start calling to you. Not with sound. With something else. A pull. A compulsion. Graham was experienced enough to resist, but Amy wasn't. And once she was taken, he and Kendrick tried to save her. And that's when they were all taken. Over the next few months, I became the unofficial keeper of the Going to the Sun Road protocols. I trained new rangers, though I couldn't include the supernatural elements in official briefings. Instead, I worked the warnings into practical safety advice. Never stop at overlooks after 6 p.m. due to poor visibility and rockfall danger. Don't approach stationary figures on overlooks as they may be disoriented hikers who could fall. If you see something unusual, report it, but don't investigate personally. Most rangers accepted these as standard safety measures. A few asked questions, pushed for real explanations. Those were the ones I pulled aside privately and showed Ray's notebook. Spring came. The road crew spent weeks clearing 50 miles of snow, avalanche debris, and winter damage. In late June, Going to the Sun Road reopened for the summer season. Tourists flooded in, eager to drive one of the most scenic roads in America. And for 3 months, everything was fine. The summer sun stayed high long enough that sunset didn't hit the critical overlooks during normal visiting hours. The threshold figures, whatever they were, remained dormant or invisible during the long days. But in mid-September, as the days shortened and sunset crept earlier, I started getting reports. Tourists seeing stationary figures at Logan Pass, hikers describing people standing at overlooks who didn't respond to greetings, photographers mentioning how certain spots had strange lighting anomalies at sunset. I knew what was coming. The danger window was opening again. On September 20th, exactly 1 day before the anniversary of Graham's disappearance, Warren Blackwood called me into his office. Warren was the park superintendent, 59 years old, Blackfeet heritage, 24 years at Glacier. He'd been here during previous incidents. He knew the truth. We're entering the threshold period, late September into early October, the time when the overlooks become dangerous. He pulled out incident reports from previous years. Statistically, we can expect at least 1 disappearance, maybe more if we have heavy tourist traffic during sunset hours. What can we do differently this year? We know what happened to Graham. We know the danger signs. Can we close the affected overlooks during the evening hours? On what grounds? We'd need to cite specific threats: rockfall, wildlife, road damage. Saying supernatural entities appear at sunset isn't going to fly with park administration or the public. He was quiet for a moment. But we can increase ranger presence. Position people at the dangerous overlooks during the evening hours. Not to stop the threshold figures, but to keep people moving. Keep them from stopping, from investigating, from making contact. That puts rangers at risk. I know, but rangers know the danger. Tourists don't. We have a duty to protect them even if we can't officially explain why. So we implemented an unofficial safety protocol. Every evening from 6 p.m. until dark, we stationed rangers at Logan Pass, The Loop, Birdwoman Falls, and Weeping Wall. Their job was simple: keep traffic moving. Don't let anyone stop or linger. If you see the threshold figures, radio it in, but don't approach. And under no circumstances make physical contact with anything that appears stationary and human-shaped at the overlooks after 6 p.m. For the first week, it worked. We kept people moving. Had a few arguments with photographers who wanted to stay for golden hour shots, but we remained firm. No stopping at those overlooks after 6. Park policy, safety reasons, end of discussion. But on September 27th, a week into our enhanced patrols, something changed. My partner Mia and I were stationed at Logan Pass, watching the sunset approaches. The Continental Divide was spectacular that evening, the peaks catching the last light, turning gold and orange and deep red. Tourists were stopping despite our presence, taking quick photos before we could shoo them along. At 6:07 p.m., I saw them. 3 threshold figures, one at the main overlook platform, one near the visitor center, one standing on the trail to Hidden Lake. They appeared exactly as Graham had described, perfectly still, facing the road. The light around them was wrong, like they existed in permanent shadow even though they were in direct sunset glow. And they were rotated slightly wrong, angled in ways that made my eyes hurt to look at directly. "Mia, do you see them?" She was already on the radio. "Dispatch, this is Cordova at Logan Pass. We have threshold manifestations. 3 visible. Requesting backup and traffic diversion." "Copy. Backup en route. Estimate 20 minutes. 20 minutes. We had to keep people away from the figures for 20 minutes. I got on the PA system in our truck. "Attention visitors. Due to rockfall danger, all overlooks at Logan Pass are closed until further notice. Please return to your vehicles and continue to lower elevations." Most people complied. Grumbled, but complied. But one man didn't. He was standing near his RV, camera in hand, staring at the threshold figure on the main overlook platform. "Sir, you need to leave this area now." He didn't respond, just kept staring. And I realized what was happening. The figure was calling to him, that silent pull Graham had mentioned, the compulsion that made you want to approach, to investigate, to make contact. I started toward him, but Mia grabbed my arm. "Don't. You get too close to him while he's being pulled, you might get caught in it too. We can't just let him walk up to that thing. We don't have a choice. Once the pull starts, intervening is dangerous for everyone." The man started walking, slow, dreamlike steps toward the overlook, toward the figure. His camera hung forgotten at his side, all his attention fixed on the perfectly still shape waiting at the wall. And then something unexpected happened. Another tourist, a woman in her 60s, stepped between the man and the figure. She didn't look at the threshold figure, didn't acknowledge it, just positioned herself in the man's path and spoke to him directly. "Hey there. I think you dropped something back at your RV. Maybe you should check." The man blinked, confused, the spell breaking. What?" "Your RV door is open. Might want to secure it before you drive." He looked back at his vehicle, then at the woman, then at where the figure stood. But now he seemed to see it for what it was. His face went pale. "What is that thing?" "Don't know. Don't care. But I think we should both leave, right now." They walked back to the parking area together, got in their vehicles, drove away. And the threshold figure remained still, watching, waiting for the next person to fall under its influence. Mia was staring at the woman who'd intervened. How did she know? How did she know not to look at it directly, but to break the connection? I don't know, but I'm glad she did. Backup arrived 15 minutes later. By then, the sun had fully set and the threshold figures had vanished. But the encounter left me shaken, because I'd seen how easily someone could be pulled, how the compulsion worked, and how close we'd come to losing another victim. That night, I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about the figures, about their purpose. Were they really guardians or hunters from another realm, or was there another explanation? I decided I needed to talk to someone who might have deeper knowledge. Someone from the Blackfeet community whose ancestors had lived in these mountains long before going to the Sun Road existed. I reached out to Warren, asked if he could introduce me to any elders who might know the old stories. He made some calls. 2 days later, I was sitting in a small house on the Blackfeet reservation, talking to a woman named Margaret Whitecalf, who was 86 years old and a keeper of traditional knowledge. "The high places have always been doorways," she said in a voice that was surprisingly strong despite her age. "My grandfather told me stories his grandfather told him, about the time when the world was young and the barriers between realms were thin. The mountain passes were particularly dangerous, places where you could step from this world into the spirit world without realizing it until it was too late." "What are the figures?" "The ones who appear at sunset. They have different names in different stories. Watchers, collectors, the between walkers. They exist in the threshold space when day becomes night. Their purpose is to maintain the boundary, to keep people from crossing over accidentally, or perhaps to claim those who do cross over, depending on which stories you believe. But the road goes right through those threshold spaces. We've built overlooks at the exact spots where the barriers are thinnest. She nodded slowly. Yes. Your people built a road through the most sacred and dangerous parts of the mountains. Not because you didn't know better, but because you didn't believe the warnings. And now you have tourists stopping at the exact spots where the doorways open, standing at the exact locations where the watchers stand guard. Of course, there are disappearances. Is there a way to protect people? To close the doorways or keep the watchers away? The doorways can't be closed. They've existed since the mountains rose. As for the watchers, they're not evil. They're just doing what they've always done. The problem is humans being in places humans shouldn't be. At times, humans shouldn't be there. So the only solution is to keep people away from those spots during sunset? Or tear down the overlooks? Remove the viewing platforms. Let those spaces return to wilderness. She looked at me with eyes that had seen decades of change. But your parks department won't do that. Too many tourists want to see the sunset from Logan Pass. Too much money in the scenic overlooks, so you'll keep having disappearances, and you'll keep calling them accidents, and the watchers will keep claiming those who venture too close during the threshold time. I left Margaret's house with more questions than answers. The watchers couldn't be stopped. The doorways couldn't be closed. All we could do was try to keep people away during the danger hours. But how long could we maintain that? How many close calls before our luck ran out? The answer came 3 days later, on September 30th, the day before October began, the day when the threshold period historically saw its highest concentration of incidents. Mia and I were on evening patrol, starting our sweep of Going to the Sun Road at 5 p.m. The plan was to reach Logan Pass by 6, station ourselves there during the peak danger window, then work our way back down as darkness fell. We were passing the Loop, that famous hairpin turn with its dramatic overlook, when we saw the tour bus. A large coach, probably 40 passengers, pulled over at the viewing area, and the time was 5:58 p.m., 2 minutes before 6. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch, we have a tour bus stopped at the Loop, 5800 hours. We need them moving now. Copy. We'll try to contact the tour company, but contact would take too long. I could already see passengers disembarking, cameras in hand, walking toward the overlook wall, and I could see them, 3 threshold figures, already manifesting even though sunset was still minutes away, standing at different points along the overlook, waiting. They're early, Mia said. They've never appeared before 6 before. Maybe they know. Maybe they sense the large group. More potential victims. We pulled up behind the tour bus, lights flashing. I got on the PA system. Attention tour group. This overlook is closed due to safety concerns. Please return to your vehicle immediately. The tour guide, a young man in his 20s, approached our truck. Officer, is there a problem? We're scheduled for sunset photos here. It's part of the package. The overlook is unsafe. You need to leave now. But we paid for... I don't care what you paid for. This area is closing in 60 seconds. Get your passengers back on that bus or I'll cite your company for every violation I can think of. He looked annoyed but nodded, started herding people back toward the bus, but they were slow, taking last-minute photos, complaining about the ranger ruining their sunset experience. And the whole time the 3 threshold figures stood perfectly still, watching the crowd with their eyeless faces. One passenger, a teenage girl, had wandered further down the overlook than the others. She was filming with her phone, doing some kind of social media video, and she was walking backward toward the wall, toward where one of the figures stood, completely unaware. Mia, the girl, far end of the overlook. My partner was already moving. She ran toward the teenager, calling out, "Miss, you need to stop moving, right now!" The girl turned, annoyed. "I'm just getting a shot of the—" She backed into the threshold figure. Her body passed through it like walking through smoke. And then the figure solidified, wrapped around her, and began pulling her toward the wall, toward the 200-foot drop beyond. The girl screamed, tried to push away, but the figure's grip was impossible to break. I could see her feet sliding across the stone, leaving marks as she was dragged toward the edge. Mia reached them. "Did exactly what you're not supposed to do according to the protocols." She grabbed the girl's arm and pulled in the opposite direction, engaged in a tug-of-war with something that shouldn't exist. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. 2 more threshold figures were manifesting behind Mia, moving toward her. If they grabbed her while she was already in contact with the first one, she'd be pulled in too, and probably take the teenager with her. I didn't think, just acted, ran toward them, putting myself between Mia and the approaching figures. They stopped, angled their heads in that wrong way, studying me, deciding. "Mia! Let go! You can't win this!" "I'm not letting her die." The girl was at the wall now, her body bent backward over the edge, held only by Mia's grip on one arm and the figure's grip pulling the other direction. She was sobbing, terrified. Her phone dropped and forgotten on the stone. "On 3, pull as hard as you can," Mia said. 1, 2, 3 exclamation mark. They pulled together, and somehow, impossibly, the figure's grip broke. The girl flew backward, crashing into Mia, both of them hitting the ground hard. The threshold figure stood at the wall for a moment, empty hands raised. Then it simply faded, dissolved back into nothing. The 2 figures that had been approaching me stopped, rotated to face the sunset directly. And then they too vanished as the last direct light disappeared behind the peaks. I helped Mia and the girl up. The teenager was shaking, crying, unable to speak. Her arm where the figure had grabbed her was ice cold and had turned a strange blue-gray color. Not frostbite. Something else. "Get her to the hospital. Now. Tell them hypothermia, exposure, and possible shock. Don't mention what actually happened." Mia nodded and got the girl into our truck. The tour group was completely silent, having witnessed something they couldn't explain. The guide looked pale, all his earlier annoyance replaced with fear. "What the hell was that thing?" "A hazard of these mountains, which is why we tell people not to stop at overlooks after 6 p.m. Now get your passengers on that bus and off this road, and maybe rethink your sunset photo packages." He didn't argue. The bus was moving within 2 minutes, heading down the mountain at speed. I radioed dispatch. "Cordova is taking a victim to hospital. Possible severe hypothermia. I'm continuing patrol to Logan Pass." "Copy. Do you need backup?" "Negative. The figures have retreated for now, but we need a memo to all tour companies. No stops at the marked overlooks after 6 p.m. for any reason. Make it a firm rule, not a suggestion." "I'll pass it up the chain." I continued up the road alone. The sun was gone now, true darkness falling fast in the high country. Most tourists had already descended. The road was nearly empty, just me and the mountain and whatever dwelt in the threshold spaces. I reached Logan Pass at 6:45. The Continental Divide stretched out in both directions, peaks still faintly visible against the darkening sky. The parking area was empty except for one vehicle, a Ranger truck. Warren's. I found him standing at the main overlook, looking out at the vastness. For a moment, I thought I saw figures standing with him, but when I blinked, there was nothing, just him alone in the gathering dark. "Sir, you shouldn't be here alone after sunset." He turned. His expression was strange, peaceful but sad. "I wanted to see them again. The Watchers. I saw them once before, 30 years ago, when I was young and stupid and thought I could understand them. They spared me that time, let me go. I've always wondered why. Warren, we need to leave. Now. Do you know what they showed me, Travis? When they grabbed me back in 1994, they showed me what they guard. The doorways lead to places our minds can't fully comprehend. Beautiful places, terrible places, places where time doesn't work right and the laws of physics are just suggestions. Graham and the others, they're not dead. They're there, living in those spaces, and they're happy. Or maybe happiness isn't the right word. Fulfilled, complete. I don't know. But they're not suffering. That's not possible. That's not how it works. The protocols say anyone taken by the Watchers is gone, lost. The protocols were written by people who never talked to the ones who came back. And yes, some do come back. Not many, but some. He looked at me directly. I'm retiring, Travis. Leaving Glacier next month, moving to Minnesota where it's flat and safe and boring. And I wanted to see them one more time before I go. Wanted to thank them, in a way, for teaching me to respect the mystery, for showing me that not everything needs to be understood or controlled. You're talking like they're benevolent. They almost killed a teenager today. They took Graham and 2 others. They've claimed dozens of people over the decades. They guard the doorways. They claim those who don't respect the boundaries. There's a difference. He started walking back toward his truck. Come on, we shouldn't linger. Even I'm not foolish enough to stay too long. We drove down together in convoy. The road was empty now, most sane people having descended before dark. We passed the loop, Birdwoman Falls, Weeping Wall. At each spot, I thought I saw shapes in the darkness, figures standing at the overlooks, watching us pass. But they made no move to approach. We were leaving, respecting the boundary, and so they let us go. At the bottom, Warren pulled over one more time. I'm making you road operations supervisor, effective immediately. Ray's retiring too. It'll be your job to maintain the map, to train the next generation, to keep the knowledge alive. I'm only 31. There are rangers with way more experience. But you believe. You've seen them. You understand what we're dealing with. That's more important than experience. He handed me a folder. This contains everything. The map, the protocols, the history, contact information for tribal elders who can provide additional context. It's your responsibility now. I took the folder, felt the weight of it. Not just paper and ink, but decades of accumulated knowledge. Lives lost, lessons learned the hard way. What if I can't keep people safe? What if knowing isn't enough? It won't always be enough. Some people will ignore warnings, some will be unlucky, some will fall victim despite our best efforts. But you'll save more than you lose, and you'll pass the knowledge on to whoever comes after you. That's all any of us can do. He drove away. I didn't see him again before his retirement. Heard he moved to a small town in Minnesota. Bought a house far from any national parks, far from any threshold spaces. Living out his days somewhere the world made normal sense. The teenage girl survived. The blue-gray coloring on her arm faded over a few days, though she reported feeling cold there for weeks afterward. Her parents tried to sue the Park Service for negligence, but without being able to explain what actually happened, their case fell apart. Eventually, they settled for a refund on the tour and a strongly worded letter about safety protocols. The girl herself didn't talk much about what happened, but she did post on social media once, a brief message that got a lot of attention. Something lives in the mountains at Glacier. It's not an animal. It's not human. It's something else. And if you see it, don't touch it. Don't even look at it too long. Just leave. I'm lucky to be alive. Park officials dismissed it as exaggeration, trauma-induced fantasy, a young person seeking attention. But a few people who'd been on that tour bus backed up her story, described the same things. the figure made of shadow, the impossible grip, the way it faded when the light changed. Most people didn't believe them, but some did, and bookings for sunset tours on Going to the Sun Road dropped by 30% over the next season. Tour companies started scheduling their trips to finish well before 6 p.m. Guides began telling passengers, in carefully worded ways, that certain overlooks were best avoided during evening hours. We couldn't tell the full truth, but we could influence behavior, could create a culture of caution around the marked locations, and it worked. The next September-October period, we had 0 disappearances. First time in over a decade. But the threshold figures are still there. I see them sometimes during patrols, always between 6 and 7:30 p.m., always at the 4 marked overlooks, always perfectly still, watching, waiting for someone to break the rules. And people do break the rules, despite warnings, despite signs, despite rangers explicitly telling them to keep moving. Some tourists are so focused on getting the perfect photo, so convinced of their own invincibility, that they ignore everything we tell them. 2 months ago, a photographer set up a tripod at Logan Pass at 6:15 p.m. We told him to leave. He argued he had a right to use public land, that we couldn't restrict his access without specific cause, so he stayed. And at 6:22 p.m., a threshold figure manifested 3 feet behind him. We watched it happen, watched him take photo after photo, completely unaware of the figure standing behind him. And then he decided to change position, stepped backward without looking, passed through the figure. It grabbed him, he screamed, dropped his expensive camera. And Mia and I had a choice: intervene and risk becoming targets ourselves, or let him be taken. We chose intervention. Both grabbed him, pulled against the figure's grip. And this time, we couldn't break it. The figure was too strong. Or maybe it had learned from the incident with the teenage girl, had adapted its grip to be unbreakable. We pulled for what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds, and then the figure just released him. Let go. Faded away. No warning, no apparent reason. The photographer collapsed, gasping. His camera was smashed. His hands were ice cold and blue-gray, and he was crying, not from pain, but from fear, from understanding how close he'd come to being pulled through a doorway into somewhere human minds can't process. I saw it, he kept saying. When it grabbed me, I saw where it wanted to take me. There were others there, people, dozens of them, just standing in this gray space that went on forever. And they all turned to look at me. And I knew if I went there, I'd never come back. I'd stand there forever like them. We got him off the mountain, got his statement, filed it in the unofficial records that no administrator would ever read, and added another name to the list of people who'd encountered the Watchers and survived. He never came back to Glacier, sold all his mountain photography gear, moved to Kansas where the highest point is barely 1,000 feet, posted online about his experience, but most people assumed he was lying for attention or had some kind of episode. But I knew the truth. And so did Mia. And so did Ray and Warren and everyone who'd worked Going to the Sun Road long enough to see what lived at the threshold spaces. I've been road operations supervisor for 6 months now. It's my job to maintain the map, to train new rangers, to keep the protocols alive. And every September when the danger period begins, I feel the weight of that responsibility, because I know what happens if we fail, if someone doesn't take the warning seriously, if a ranger gets overconfident or a tourist gets too curious or the timing is just wrong. I know that people will disappear into the gray spaces between worlds, will become more of those standing figures the photographer described, forever stationary, forever watching, forever waiting. Going to the Sun Road is one of the most beautiful drives in America. Every year, over 1 million people experience its stunning views. Most of them never encounter the watchers, never see anything unusual. They drive the road, take their photos, and leave with wonderful memories. But some do encounter them. Some get caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. And those people learn what the Blackfeet have known for thousands of years, that the high places are doorways, that sunset is a threshold time, and that some boundaries should never be crossed. If you visit Glacier National Park, if you drive going to the Sun Road, I'm not going to tell you not to stop at the overlooks. They're spectacular. They're worth seeing. Just follow the timing restrictions. Don't stop at Logan Pass, the Loop, Bird Woman Falls, or Weeping Wall after 6 p.m. between mid-September and mid-October. If a ranger tells you to keep moving, listen. If you see figures at overlooks that don't move like normal people, don't approach them. Don't investigate. Don't touch them. And if you feel a pull, a compulsion to walk toward one of those figures, fight it with everything you have. Get back in your vehicle. Drive away. Don't look back. Because the watchers are patient. They've been guarding those doorways for thousands of years. They'll be there thousands of years after the road crumbles and the park ceases to exist. Time means nothing to them. They can wait. But if you give them an opening, if you make contact during those critical threshold hours, they won't hesitate. They'll pull you through. And you'll join the others in that gray space, standing forever, watching forever, waiting forever for the next person to make the same mistake. I see Graham sometimes, or I think I do. When I'm at Logan Pass during the danger hours, when the figures manifest, one of them stands in a way that reminds me of how he used to stand. Same posture, same stance. And I wonder if some part of him is still in there, if he's aware, if he's watching me carry on the work he started. I hope not. I hope wherever he is, in whatever space exists beyond the threshold, he's at peace, that he's found something worth the trade, that the gray space the photographer described isn't as terrible as it sounds. But I don't really believe that. Because I've seen the faces of people who've been grabbed and released. I've seen the terror in their eyes, the knowledge that they came within seconds of losing everything, of being trapped forever in a space between worlds with no way home. That's the truth of going to the Sun Road. That's what the protocols protect against. That's why we have stops we skip after 6 p.m., not because of weather or wildlife or rockfall, but because the overlooks belong to something else during threshold hours. And if you don't respect that, if you insist on your right to be there anyway, you might not come back. The choice is yours. The warnings are clear. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. Just remember, the watchers are patient, the doorways are always there, and sunset comes every single day.